Hello everybody, this is Nautica Malone here, and we are here today with the Pokemon Red Randomized Nuzlocke. I'm sure if you're watching this video, you know what a Nuzlocke is, but if you don't, a Nuzlocke is when you can only catch the first encounter you get per route. You can't use any items in battle, but you are allowed to use held items. And you're supposed to be on set mode, but for this, I'm going to be on the other one because I don't know this AI very well. I haven't played these games in many years. I am also utilizing level caps, so the level of the next gym's ace is the level cap and I can't go past it. I'm also using Dupe's Claws, so if my first encounter is something I've already gotten, I can re-roll it. And also I'm using the permadeath rule as well, where if one of my Pokemon faints, it basically dies and I can never use it again. I'm also making this a series with a lot of inspiration by Chaotic Meatball's Franchiselocke. I'm doing a randomized Nuzlocke Franchiselocke. And just this game is going to be just a normal Nuzlocke. The rest of them are going to be hardcore, so I will be doing them in set mode. But just for this one, so I can kind of get back into it and learn the AI, I'm just going to do it in the other mode. Now for the very last little bit of rules, a Franchiselocke is basically where if you use a Pokemon once in battle, you can never use it again throughout any other game. So say, like this time, I have a Scyther. I can never use a Scyther ever again in any other game throughout the entire series. But I can use Evolution, such as Scizor, later. Alright, now without further ado, let's get into it. I start off this run, just like every other run, talking to my homeboy, Professor Oak, where he tells me that I'm going to be a Pokemon trainer. I name myself Chad and my rival Chud, and then I spawn into my room. I then, like an absolute idiot, run into some very tall grass where there's definitely some dangerous things in there. The professor does stop me and takes me to his lab to pick up my first encounter. After a few resets, I finally get some decent starters. I could either pick a Cubone, Weepinbell, or a Scyther, and I do end up picking Scyther. Scyther doesn't have the greatest of coverage moves in the very start. He does have high jump kick for the normal type coverage, but the rest of his moves are normal type, which that is kind of rough, but it'll be okay. For the first rival battle, it's Scyther versus Weepinbell, and this goes really well. I ended up launching off a Horn Drill. At the time, I didn't know what this move was, and actually it's a 30% accuracy one-hit KO move, and I end up landing it on the first try, instantly KOing Weepinbell. I then leave the comforts of Pallet Town, where I go to Viridian City and become a UPS driver for Professor Oak, and then for a little bit of a present, he gives me the Pokédex. On Route 1, I do end up encountering and catching a Pidgey, which is weird because this is randomized, but that is actually normally your first encounter in every other normal red run. But this Pidgey is never used throughout the entire run, so it's not going to be counted towards the Franchiselocke total. Then on Route 22, I get one of the most important encounters of the game, being Sandslash. You would be like, Sandslash is okay, but this Sandslash came with Earthquake right off of catch, and this is one of the most important encounters of the run. Then on Route 2, I catch a Vaporeon, which is the Gooner's favorite Pokemon, but in this, it is incredible coverage. It starts with Petal Dance and Thunderbolt, which is awesome. Now, if you guys didn't know, I do have a nickname theme in this run, and it's going to be countries. I just put on my phone a randomized country generator, and whatever country came up, I named the next one. Then in Viridian Forest, I catch an Onix. Now, this guy actually has the one fire move that I get throughout the entire run. This has been my Achilles heel throughout this entire run, was fire type coverage. And this guy had the one move. Now, just full disclosure, to make this run a little bit harder, I decided to not EV train my Pokemon. I used rare candies to level them up to level caps, and the only EVs that I did get was against trainer Pokemon, which aren't very many. Next up on our list was Brock. He led with Chansey, which was instantly high jump kicked by Scyther, and then he sent out Ghastly with his part poison type, gets obliterated by Cyrilanka's Earthquake. He does get one hit off though, but Cyrilanka easily tanks it, only taking 3 hit points of damage, and then launches off the Earthquake for the clean one-hit KO. Then on Route 3, I pick up a Ninetales. Now this guy was a very bad encounter, if I say so myself. He had very little amount of coverage moves. He did come with the one ghost type move of the run with Lick, but Lick sucks. And I did eventually end up teaching him Blizzard, but most of this run he was just a glorified HM slave. Now with the Mount Moon Gauntlet out of the way, it was time for Misty. Misty in this randomizer actually had 2 bug types, which is very weird. She led with Venomoth, which was instantly taken down by Scyther with 2 Mega Punches. After Venomoth, I instantly switch into Onyx, which was a very bad idea because I didn't know this at the time, but this thing has Crab Hammer. So Onyx does get to launch off a very strong Fire Blast, which does end up getting the burn, but then Venonat lands a nasty Crab Hammer, one-shotting Onyx, leading to the first death of the run. This was a very stupid mistake, and I could have very easily got out of this fight without losing Onyx, but in the end, I said in Franchiselocke to clean it up with a Horn Attack. With Misty down, it was now time for the second rival fight of the run. This fight is normally pretty hard because the level caps in between Gym 2 and Gym 3 are only 3 levels. You can't overlevel for this. Chud sends out a Shelder first, which is taken out by Scyther with 2 bites. He then shows Graveler, so I instantly switch out to Vaporeon to demolish the Graveler with a Petal Dance. He then sends in Gyarados, but I keep Vaporeon on the field and hit it with a Petal Dance, which unfortunately doesn't get the KO because I kind of forgot that Gyarados was a flying type, so it was not very effective. But in the end, it ends up being taken out in 2 hits with Petal Dance. He then sends in Weepinbell, which then I switch into Japan and hit it with 3 Horn Attacks, taking the win. On Route 24, on the grass to the left of Nugget Bridge, I end up picking a Snorlax up. Now this guy was a tank throughout this run. He was one of the best Pokemon in the run. Then on Route 25, I pick up a Machop, and this brings up a special point in this run that I did use the Universal Pokemon Randomizer, so trade evolutions such as Machamp are actually obtainable through level up. In this case, Machamp is at level 37, so it isn't like super broken where I get it way too early, but it just makes the impossible evolutions possible. I then barge into Bill's house and see him doing some freaky furry stuff where he turned himself into a Pokemon, but I help him out and he gives me the ticket to board the SSN. I then make the trek to Vermilion City where I do meet my rival on the SSN. My rival leads off with Tauros and I lead off with Sandslash. Now this is kind of a bad matchup for me because Tauros does end up showing a grass type move, but my Earthquake does more than half and his does less than half, so I'm able to win the matchup with obviously dodging the critical hit. My rival sends in Cloyster, so I end up making the switch to Vaporeon, who has Thunderbolt, which one-shots Cloyster instantly. Then rival sends out Clefairy, and I do say in with Vaporeon, this is probably a little bit of a bad idea because I do have others with fighting type moves, but I ended up killing it in just 3 Dizzy Punches. He then sends out Weepinbell, which I stay in on with Vaporeon. I end up launching off a very soft Pound, which only does about 1/4, and he lets off a Boomerang, which does about 1/3 of my health. So I do end up going for a Dizzy Punch, which does crit. I then launch off one more Dizzy Punch, which does connect, and I do end up winning this fight deathless. I then pat this old man on the back to get the HM for cut, and now it is time to face off against Lieutenant Surge. Lieutenant Surge starts off with a Krabby, which Scyther quickly kills with 3 bites. He then sends in Golem, which is quickly taken out by Vaporeon's Petal Dance. He then sends in Exeggutor, where I send out Snorlax, and I take him down in about 4 Swifts. I probably could have done this a little bit faster, but I am also very confused why Lieutenant Surge kept going for X speeds. I don't know why, because Snorlax was so slow that he outsped Snorlax anyway, but I don't know, this AI is weird. I then make the long trek through Rock Tunnel until I finally make it to Lavender Town. And I'm going to do a little bit of a rant on Rock Tunnel. I hate Rock Tunnel. You can't see, you have to backtrack all the way to the very start to get Flash. It's just a bad design. I would just like to say that I do end up catching a bunch of more Pokemon, normally about one a route, of course, because it's a Nuzlocke and I want to have a full box, but I never end up using any of them, so they never count towards the Franchiselocke. After I take another shady underground area, I finally make it to Celadon City, the Gambler's Paradise, where I have to then vanquish Team Rocket. One absolutely incredible detail that I cannot overlook is that Celadon Department Store had the Ice Beam TM, which is awesome, and I taught it to about 3 out of my 6 Pokemon. In Celadon, though, before I take on Team Rocket, I go to the Celadon City Gym, where there is that old man looking through the window, which is very weird, I must say, but to each their own, I guess. I then take on Erica. Erica actually gave me a ton of problems. She led with Machamp, which for some reason knows Blizzard, and nearly kills Scyther and freezes Scyther, so I quickly have to switch out. I switch out into my Machoke, which then instantly eats a critical hit Blizzard, which does about 2/3 again, and I have to switch out again, which then I switch out into Snorlax, who is an absolute tank. Machamp hits Snorlax with a very strong Seismic Toss, which, if this was any other gen and Seismic Toss was a fighting move, Snorlax would probably be dead. But luckily, Snorlax survives, and he launches off a very strong Psychic. Yes, Snorlax learns Psychic by level up, and he ends up taking out Machamp in just about 2 turns. Next, Erica shows that she's switching into Persian, and at this point, I didn't know what to do. All of my Pokemon that had fighting type moves were very disabled at about 1/3 health, so I end up switching into Sandslash and launching off a Stab Earthquake, which does end up one-shotting. Erica then switches into Rapidash, which luckily Sandslash can one-hit with Earthquake, he outspeeds, and the fight is over, and we won it deathless. But just barely deathless. We probably should have lost someone there. Now, clearing the Celadon City game corner went very smoothly, except for one little piece. This Porygon decided to explode onto Vaporeon, nearly killing him and left him only at 20 HP. If we would have lost Vaporeon there, that run would be over, because we would have been missing the very crucial coverage. The rival fight in Pokemon Tower went just about as smoothly as you could think. At this point of the game, it was very, very scary because he did have 5 Pokemon. I led with Ninetales, and he led with Gengar. Now, this was very scary because Gengar kept launching off Metronomes. And if this would have gotten a single ground, rock, or water-type move, I would have lost Ninetales here, but luckily it just hits Flamethrower and High Jump Kick, and I take it out in 3 licks. He then sends out Jinx, and I send out Sandslash and demolish Jinx with a one-hit KO Stab Earthquake. Graveler comes out next, and I switch into Vaporeon to obliterate it with a Petal Dance. Now, this next part is very, very scary, and if I wouldn't have learned Ice Beam, and this would have been over. He then shows Dragonite, and this is bad news. I have to instantly switch out into someone that knows an Ice-type move, and luckily, that's about half my team. I send out Scyther, and he one-hits Dragonite with an Ice Beam, and then the rival sends out Victory Bell. Now, the amount of foreshadowing in this clip is absurd. This Victory Bell is like a Scyther killer. His moveset is built specifically to counter Scyther. He has Ice-type moves, he has Electric-type moves, it's horrible. But eventually, Scyther wins the War of Attrition, outspeeding and killing Victory Bell with 2 Ice Beams. I then save Mr. Fuji from the Rocket Grunts, and then he gives me a gift, the Pokeflute. This opens up the entire map to me, and this is awesome. I then head south to Fuchsia City, where I enter the Safari Zone and get some of the last remaining HMs that I need. I get Surf in this random house, and I also pick up the Gold Teeth and give to the Warden to get Strength. HM for Surf was a big deal. I didn't have a single water type move up into this point, and I taught it to about 2/3 of my team because Surf is an incredible move, and I get it guaranteed in every run, so I normally will use this a lot during Nuzlocks. At this point of the game, I made a very stupid mistake. I leveled up my team to the level cap of 43, which is the level cap for the next 2 gyms, for the first of the 2 gyms. So I had to take on the entirety of the Rocket's hideout without gaining a level, and this was a giant pain in the butt. But in the meantime, it was time to take on Koga. He leads with a Pidgeotto, which I instantly demolished with Scyther's Ice Beam. Koga then sends out Gengar, and this is where it gets very dangerous. Last time, Gengar only had Metronome, and I thought, hey, let's just take a gamble with Sandslash. But no, he leads off with Petal Dance and nearly kills Sandslash. Sandslash holds on with just 27 HP and fires off the Earthquake, killing Gengar. This was a very close one, and this probably would have been a run ender. Koga then sends out Seeking, which I switch into Vaporeon and demolish it with the Petal Dance. Then he shows a Weepinbell, so I switch out to Scyther, and I launch off an Ice Beam, which crits, but doesn't kill, but it does freeze Weepinbell, so I'm able to take it out the next turn with another Ice Beam, winning me another Deathless Gym Badge. After Fuchsia, I do make it Saffron, and this is where I realize how stupid of a mistake that I made. I thought I was going to be able to take on the Saffron Gym before Rocket's hideout, but unfortunately there is a Rocket Grunt blocking the way, and he only leaves once you beat Giovanni, so I was in for a very, very hard Rocket's hideout. During the Rocket's hideout, I had to switch around very, very often, and it was very boring and very difficult. And I had to heal many times because all of my Pokemon kept getting hit on switch, and this was just a very miserable experience. But then I finally made it to my rival. Luckily, the one member in my team that had the most experience left until the next level was Machoke, and Machoke was an absolute beast during this fight. He swept the entirety of my rival's team, and I was able to get through the entirety of the Rocket's hideout with my team still being under the level cap. And you may be wondering, what happened to the Giovanni fight? It's a Giovanni fight. It was nothing. It was so easy, and now it was time for Sabrina. I led with Vaporeon, Sabrina led with Ditto, and Vaporeon actually learned a fighting move, so Ditto went down in just 2 karate chops. Sabrina's next 2 Pokemon were Bulbasaur and Porygon, which were swiftly taken out by Scyther with an Ice Beam and a high jump kick. For Sabrina's last Pokemon, she sends out a Nidorino, which I switch in Sandslash and fire off a Stab Earthquake, killing Nidorino. And Sandslash has really come into his own to become a true poison type killer. He was a beast, and that was another Deathless Gym Badge. After defeating Team Rocket, the next pieces of the game really went quite fast. I flew to Pallet Town and then surfed to Cinnabar Island to take on Blaine. Blaine, per usual, was an absolute pushover. I lead with Machamp, and he leads with Alakazam. I go for a fly and leave Alakazam with just a sliver, but he goes for submission, taking himself out with recoil. He then sends out a Psyduck, which gets then completely blasted out of the sky by Machamp's Thunderbolt. He then sends out a Fearow, which does outspeed and set up a light screen, so Thunderbolt only does about a third. And this is bad, but Machamp, the GOAT, has Rock Slide. And so Fearow goes down after weirdly going for another light screen after he just set one up. This AI is very stupid. Next, Blaine sends out Flareon, and I send out Vaporeon for like the battle of the evolutions. It was awesome. What I thought was really weird here is that Blaine pre-fired a Super Potion on Flareon. Gym 7, by the way, and still using a Super Potion, and didn't even attack first turn. He pre-fired it. So I swiftly took out Flareon in 2 turns of Surf, and I really think that Blaine might be the stupidest AI ever. I then fly to Viridian City to take on my 8th and final gym badge, being Giovanni. But in his gym, tragedy strikes. My game freezes, and my last save was in Fuchsia City at badge 4. So I had to replay this entire section all over again. Just kidding, I went into Pokédex and gave myself 7 badges so I could take on Giovanni instantly. Giovanni, per usual, was a pushover. He leads with Hypno, and I lead with Vaporeon, and I launch off a Surf, which does 2 hit, and then he sends in Squirtle, which gets 1-shot by Vaporeon's Thunderbolt. Giovanni then sends out Bulbasaur, which I quickly take out with Machamp's Fly. He then sends in Meowth, which is actually quite fitting, and which does get kicked out with a Stab Double Kick. Only in 1 kick, by the way, didn't take 2. And then he sends out, weirdly, a second Hypno, which gets taken out by 3 flies. And that is another gym badge with 0 deaths. Now it was finally time for my second to last rival fight. I take my rival on Route 22, and this one is a doozy, let me tell you. He leads with Clefable, which is taken out by 3 Karate Chops by Vaporeon. He then sends out Nidorino, which, who guessed it, gets taken out by an Earthquake from Sandslash. He then sends out Dugtrio, and man, this Dugtrio was going for the kill. He launches off a Fissure, which obviously does miss. Franchiselocke shoots off the Surf, which barely doesn't kill, which means there's another 30% chance that I lose Sandslash. But luckily, Fissure doesn't hit, and he gets taken out with a second Surf. He then sends out Jigglypuff, which gets quickly taken out by Scyther's high jump kick. Next is Metapod, and I stay in with Scyther. And I launch off an Ice Beam, and somehow Metapod survives, but he gets frozen solid and is killed the next turn with a second Ice Beam. My rival then sends in a starter Victory Bell, which is actually a beast of a Pokemon. I did not know this. I launch off an Ice Beam with Scyther, which does under half, and then he launches off an Ice Punch, which nearly takes out Scyther, leaving him deep in the yellow. But then I switch out to Machamp, and he gets taken out with a Fly. Now that I'm done with my rival, I can finally, painstakingly make my way through Victory Road, and now I'm finally at the Indigo Plateau to take on the Elite Four, and then eventually, hopefully, become champion. My team for the Elite Four is actually looking pretty nice. In the one spot, there's Vaporeon, with Karate Chop, Surf, Thunderbolt, and Petal Dance. Next up was Scyther, with Bite, Surf, Ice Beam, and High Jump Kick. Third is Ninetales with Twin Needle, Blizzard, Flash, and Surf. Fourth is Snorlax with Strength, Cut, Thunderbolt, and Psychic. Fifth is Machamp with Double Kick, Fly, Rock Throw, and Thunderbolt. And finally, the Poison-type killer himself is Sandslash, who knows Earthquake, Ice Beam, Rock Throw, and Surf. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if I say so myself, that is a stacked team. The first member of the Elite Four, Lorelei, sends out a Ditto first, as I send out Vaporeon. Vaporeon quickly sends off a Karate Chop, which is about 2/3, and Vaporeon luckily doesn't get poisoned by the acid, and then quickly takes out Ditto with the Karate Chop. She then sends out Eradicate, so I switch into Machamp. Machamp is hit with a very soft Gust, but because of his incredible defense stat, he takes only just about a 4th, and then lands the Double Kick to quickly one-shot Eradicate. Next is Coughing. In a normal Sandslash fashion, he one-hits with Earthquake. Next is Jolteon, who is incredibly speedy, so he does end up outspeeding Sandslash, but he hits him with a very soft Payday, which only does about 10 HP, and then Sandslash hits the very strong Stab Earthquake to take out Jolteon. Now it was just one Pokemon left. Last and probably least is Poliwhirl, which through a couple of weird dig turns, Turkey finally lands a Petal Dance to end the fight deathless. Next up is Bruno, who leads with a Charmander as I lead with Vaporeon, and Charmander is quickly taken out by one Surf. Vaporeon then proceeds to land two more Surfs, killing Bruno's next two Pokemon. Next up is Wartortle, who is outsped and taken out very quickly with a Petal Dance. Lastly, Bruno sends out Wigglytuff, which is then taken out in one hit by Machamp's Double Kick. Agatha's third and Vaporeon can't really do much to this thing, so I switch out into Scyther, and he leads with two quick Ice Beams to take the kill with only about losing half of his health, because Metapod weirdly has very good moves against Scyther. Next is Oddish. I send out Snorlax and fire off a Strength, which barely doesn't kill Oddish. And then Agatha just proceeds to heal up, and then I take out Oddish with a second Strength. Next up is Venonat, and I quickly get rid of this little bug that killed my Onix with Machamp using Fly. He actually did miss the first one, but Venonat just went for Focus Energy, which is a 2-turn move, so then I outsped, went for a second Fly in one hit. Next was Ekans, and predictably was demolished by an Earthquake from Sandslash. Adhika weirdly had a second Oddish, but Sandslash had Ice Beam, so it just is a quick one-shot by Sandslash, killing her ace and getting 3 out of the 4 Elite Four out of the way, deathless. Next up is Drake, and he leads with a Magmar, which is perfect because I led with Vaporeon. Magmar does outspeed, but hits with a very soft Rock Slide, and I just take him out with one Surf the next turn. He then sends out Slowpoke, which is quickly taken out by Vaporeon's Thunderbolt. Next up is Nidoqueen, and you guessed it, was demolished by Sandslash's Earthquake. Next up is Poliwrath, so I send out Vaporeon, who hits the Thunderbolt and actually paralyzes Poliwrath, because Poliwrath did survive with the Sliver, but then Poliwrath got the full para, so I quickly fired off the second Thunderbolt, getting the kill. Lastly, Drake sends out a Lapras, and I switch into Scyther and quickly take it out with 2 high jump kicks, securing the win and finally finishing the Elite Four completely deathless. Now it is time for the final battle against the champion Chud. He leads with a Tauros, and I lead with Vaporeon, and I do outspeed and hit it with a very soft Karate Chop, doing only about a third, and then he fires off a Super Fang, which does half. So I am very much forced to switch out. I switch out into Scyther, and he somehow predicts that I was going to switch out into a Bug type because he launches off the Flamethrower, which is about a half. But I outspeed the next turn and kill Tauros with a high jump kick. This is getting off to a really bad start. 2 of my Mons are just about disabled out of this fight because they're about half health, and I'm only going to sub them in if I really need to. Next up is Dodrio. I switch into Machamp because he knows Thunderbolt, but I do end up getting outsped and get hit with a very strong wing attack, which does about half. Thunderbolt luckily gets the paralysis because it does not kill, so I'm able to outspeed the next turn with a second Thunderbolt taking out Dodrio. That could have been bad if I wouldn't have gotten the paralysis. Next up, my rival sends out Dragonite, so I switch into Sandslash, which knows Ice Beam. Ice Beam doesn't get the one-shot, but Dragonite just charges up a Solar Beam, so I'm able to just take it out next turn because I outspeed. He then sends out Jinx, so I keep Sandslash in and hit a Rock Throw, which barely doesn't kill. It must have been on 1 HP, and I'm hit with a very strong Ice Punch by Jinx, which does about half to Sandslash, but since I outspeed, I just hit a second Rock Throw, killing Jinx. 5th out is Lapras, and so I switch into Machamp to try to go for the double kick KO. It does just about 2/3, but Lapras just decided to go for double team to raise evasion, and I just simply hit the next double kick to get the kill on Lapras. This is when I make the worst mistake that I could have possibly made in this moment. So I send out Scyther, and you know what this thing knows? Thunderbolt. Scyther does outspeed with the Ice Beam, but it does just about a third, and then Victory Bell launches off the Thunderbolt, and because Scyther is at pretty low HP at about half because of an earlier encounter, he goes down. I lost my starter in the very last fight. Switched into Ninetales. Ninetales outspeeds and kills Victory Bell with a Blizzard. I probably, most definitely could have done this fight significantly better. I lost my frickin' starter. I could have done this deathless, but I just went for the clip and it did not pay off. I was distraught after losing Scyther. He was with me throughout this entire run, and my stupidity lost him. I was very, very mad at myself for doing this. I should have won this deathless. Sorry, Onyx, but you live, you learn. But with that, I have finally completed Pokemon Red Randomized Nuzlocke.